Welcome to week 9 of the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman here with Ryan D'Amico.
Zach, this past week was a pretty good week in the NFL. A lot of close games and a lot of games that kind of went down to the wire. We had some wild endings. We had some wild potential, comebacks. We had some teams just collapse. We had, some blowouts, obviously, and we're going to get on. We're going to get into it all. We'll start out with the Thursday night game, Zach, like we always do. I'll look back to the start of Week 6. The Philadelphia Eagles, they go into Carolina and they beat the Carolina Panthers 28-23. Philadelphia moves to 5-1 now on the season. They're the number 1 team in the NFC, top team in the division. Obviously now Carolina falls to 4-2. Probably the best Thursday night game we've seen all year. Might be the best game we see all year here going forward. So Carson Wentz throws 3 touchdown passes. He continues to look good. He's has 7 touchdowns in his last 2 games, threw for only 222 yards, but he did enough. And then Cam Newton is the big story on the other side, really. Look, Cam had a couple nice weeks here against Detroit and New England. Faces a little bit of a better defense, and he throws 3 picks. Could have been 4. One got called back because of a really awful pass interference call, and another one was dropped. So Cam could have easily had 4 or 5 interceptions in this game. He did not look good at all. He was, once again, their leading rusher. Carolina could not run the football, made them really one-dimensional. And the Eagles hung on to win and just continue to look sharp. I mean, on all sides of the football, offense, defense, special teams. Jake Elliott continues to impress, but I just Eagles just keep on keeping on, man. We talked before the show, and I asked your opinion on the Eagles and where you think they are at this point. Why don't you tell the listeners what you told me?
They are in a good position for themselves, and I hate saying that as a Cowboys fan, but as we look across the NFC. They just beat one of the top teams. The Packers just lost Aaron Rodgers. Nobody really stands out throughout the NFC. And the Eagles they've looked good. Carson Wentz has looked fantastic. The defense really impressed. You talked about some of the interceptions there against Cam Newton. They did have one in his defense that just Jonathan Stewart should have definitely caught it. Went right through his hand. Off his body, intercepted that way. So that's one Cam, it has no fault of his own at all in that.
Sure.
But the Eagles still look, I was most impressed with their defense. No question about it. Like I mentioned with Wentz, Zach Ertz gets into the end zone twice. He's just been so consistent and so dominant from the tight end position. This team's, they're looking very good. And I've been impressed. The biggest thing that holds Carolina back is they have 0 running game, and the Eagles have just such a good balance there with LeGarrette Blount getting action on the ground, doing really well. Carson Wentz moving the team through the air, throwing 3 touchdown passes. And one thing that stood out to me in this game that I love to see from the Eagles, when we talked about college football, we talked about going for 2. And the Eagles made a decision I loved that they scored a touchdown to put them up 16-10. The Panthers got a penalty leading up to the extra point, and the Eagles decided to go for it. They got that extra little yardage there. They handed it to LeGarrette Blount, and he got in. He gave them an 18-10 lead, and they never gave up the lead after that point. So I was very impressed with that call. That was a specific situation I loved going for 2 there. Even though this wasn't quite the same, it wasn't at the end of the game like we talked about with college football, but I still love that play call.
Yeah, but it's great coaching. And look around here, Doug Peterson kind of gets bashed a lot for just a lot of the things he does and doesn't do, and just I've heard it all about Doug Peterson, and that on this hand though was a great decision. I mean, like you said, you move the ball a little closer, and you have the battering ram that is LeGarrette Blount. He's pretty much always going to get you a yard or a yard and a half, and he got in pretty easily. And they went for it and got it, and went up 2 got the 2 and went up by 8. So hey, kudos to him, and like you said, they didn't give up the lead. Last thing I wanted to talk about in this game, though, Zach, is Eagles find a way to win this game, even though the penalty discrepancy in this game was nothing like I'd ever seen before. And I'm not just saying that because I was an Eagles fan watching the game. I truly cannot remember a more one-sided officiated game in my recent memory. This one was so bad that it just felt like the refs were doing everything that they could to keep this game close and to keep the Panthers in it. The Eagles' penalties, they had 10 for 126 yards. The Panthers had 1 for 1 yard. That's a problem. That's a really big problem. And the head official for this game was Pete Morelli, who people did some digging and looked back. The last game he did for the Eagles was another game that was a big, wide margin of penalties called in that game. Again, not in the Eagles' favor. So I'm not sure what his hatred for the Eagles is, but Pete Morelli, if you're listening to this, you can go to hell, my friend. And what that crew did on Thursday was disgusting. And credit and kudos to the Eagles for still finding a way to win, because when the penalties are that bad and you have 10 for 126 yards and the opposing team only has 1 for 1 yard, most of the times you're not going to find a way to win, but the Eagles did. That was pathetic, though.
Yeah, you hate to see that where the refs are clearly affecting the game there. Although huge respect to the Eagles for still pulling it out, and it felt not as close as the final score ended up. The Eagles won by 5, 28-23, but they've really, especially in the second half, seemed to have a good control of the game. Even though it was close, they looked so much better, especially on offense. The Panthers, this was ridiculous to me. The Panthers had 3 different running backs get carries. Those 3 running backs combined for 1 yard rushing.
That's so bad.
Throughout the entire game. That includes Jonathan Stewart, 8 carries for minus 4 yards. Fozzie Whittaker, another one. Minus 3 yards on 1 carry.
There was someone out there that was forced or just does because he's just one of their starting running backs. Someone started Jonathan Stewart in fantasy this week.
I'm sure they did.
And, man, you see that line, and I'm sure those guys are running to the waiver wire and just trying to pick up anyone other than Jonathan Stewart at this point. So, just terrible there. So, we'll move on, Zach. We'll go to a team that, continues to surprise people, and again was another officiating head scratcher in this game. The New York Jets fall to the New England Patriots 24-17. But look, Jets were up 14-0 in this game early. Patriots go and score 21 unanswered. I think it was 24 unanswered actually, and 24 unanswered, and then Jets get a field goal to cut it to within 7, and then they are a victim of just a very odd call, and I'm not sure if you saw it, Zach, but I'd like to get your opinion on it if you did. Austin Seferian-Jenkins catches a ball out of the backfield and is running towards the pylon, and the left pylon, and he's trying to get inside the left pylon, and as he does, he's hit from his right side and then proceeds to fall to the ground inside the pylon, okay? So it's a scoring play. It's signaling a touchdown on the field. Officials, since it's a scoring play, they all get reviewed. It gets reviewed. The official comes out and says that because the ball bobbled, it was treated as a fumble, and the ball was a touchback, and it went to the Patriots at the 20-yard line. Austin Severian-Jenkins, at no time did he lose the football. Did the ball come out? Did the ball hit the ground? Never. All that happened was Austin Severian-Jenkins bobbled the ball just the slightest. The ball shifted just a little bit in his hand. And because of that, the officials awarded the ball to the Patriots. I thought that was a just awful call. And I legit felt bad for the Jets. Did you see that play, Zach?
That's not a play I got to see, but I've always wondered about that rule because it's so game-changing where a team's about to score a touchdown, they fumble it into the end zone, they go from having the ball inside the red zone for sure before the play started where they were almost scoring, and now it's the other team's ball going the other way where they didn't get any points out of it because of a fumble right there at the goal line. That's a huge game-changing play no matter what the scenario there. And it's unfortunate that it had such an effect here. I was amazed the Jets were even in this game.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think a lot of people were. And a lot of people still are wondering how the Jets are 3-3 and how they're competing week after week with the roster that they have. But, hey, credit Todd Bowles and credit the Jets for just, hey, you guys can say that we suck and just, we shouldn't even show up. But look, we're going to show up and we're going to give these teams a fight week in and week out. So I felt bad for the Jets this weekend. I really did. The Patriots, look, they got a big win. They go to 4-2. Brady looked okay, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The guy that stood out to me this week as I watched a little bit of that game, Gronk obviously comes back and has 2 touchdowns. But Brandon Cooks, I think it's important for them to get him going. He had 9 targets, caught 6 of them for 93 yards. No touchdowns, but still 93 yards. I think that's big for them to get him going and try to get him in rhythm and really open things up for the rest of the offense.
They definitely need him to get going, and they've got to start working him into it more. He's clearly their most talented player at either the running back or receiving position there. Probably their second most talented player at a skill position like that behind Gronk. And he's been very up and down this year, and the Patriots have as well. We talked about it a lot being their defense, but he's a guy that's really got to get them going too. And their running game's also been interesting. They every week it's somebody different. This week it was Dion Lewis leading them in rushing, 11 carries for 52 yards. He also got into the end zone. Mike Gillislee still had 10 rushes for 44 yards. But they're always – and then James White is catching passes there for him, getting catches out of the backfield, 4 for 22. They need more of Brandon Cooks. They have a lot of other guys they're spreading the ball around to, but they need someone like that Randy Moss type when he was on the Patriots to really take over and push them to the next level like a lot of people thought he would at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, completely agree. Absolutely agree, 100%. That's imperative for them going forward. Next game we're going to look at, Zach, which was a pretty interesting game. It didn't get a lot of talk going into the week, rightfully so, but was one of the more exciting games of the weekend, which was Chicago getting a road win at Baltimore in overtime, 27-24. This was a wild game, man. I mean, Chicago goes out to a big lead late, and then they get Baltimore does. I mean, they get a plethora of special teams touchdowns. They get a punt return from Bobby Rainey. Then they get another punt return from Michael Campanaro with under 2 minutes left. That game, that score brought in within 2. They got the 2-point conversion that sent it to overtime, and then with 2 minutes left in overtime, Connor Barth kicks a 40-yard field goal and Chicago wins. It's interesting, Zach. The new 10-minute rule in overtime. I'm not sure if you caught that. It didn't really get a lot of pub. It didn't get talked about much. But from going from a standardized 15-minute quarter down to starting overtime at only 10 minutes, it really opens the door to a lot more ties going forward. Like this game. The game-winning play was only happened with 2 minutes left. So if that field goal is missed, who knows how that game ends up. So an interesting game here. You have Mitchell Trubisky. He gets his first win as an NFL quarterback. Granted, he does it only completing 8 passes for 113 yards.
Yeah, he only threw 16 times.
Right. So, look, you chalk that up as a win, though. 50 carries between Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen, and a little luck was on their side as well. So Bears get a win. What you take away from this game?
I thought it was funny in one article I read yesterday. In talking about this game, they said Joe Flacco continues to lower the bar for being an elite quarterback. And it's a great description. He's paid like an elite quarterback, but his only touchdown was an interception he threw that was returned for a touchdown. He threw 2 interceptions. They continue to rely on him for whatever reason. He threw it 41 times, only completed 24 of those for 180 yards. This team just has nothing going for it. And I feel like I say this every week. I'm amazed that they're 3-3. They played some bad teams early on, which got them ahead a little bit. But this team just – Alex Collins seems like their best running back. He had 74 yards, didn't get into the end zone at all. They just have a mess. Jeremy Maclin didn't play. Mike Wallace, 30 yards, not really much anything. Rashad Perryman, former first-round pick, he's injured now. He didn't have any receptions. He hadn't really been doing much of anything. The only reason they're in the game is because of the big plays you talked about, the punt return, the kickoff return for touchdowns. If it weren't for that, this offense is just brutal.
They're terrible. And I said at the beginning of the year that this could be one of the worst offenses in football, and they're starting to live up to that, and just it's bad. And I haven't watched. I don't think I've watched one series of Baltimore Ravens offensive football this year, and I think that trend's going to continue for the foreseeable future.
I watched them against the Steelers a couple weeks ago. It is not worth it.
I'll take your word for it. I will definitely do that. So, like we say there, the Bears get a road win in overtime. Moving on, Zach, we'll look at San Francisco. Look, they lose again. However, they set a record in the process. They are the first team in NFL history to lose 5 straight games, all of which by 3 points or less, because that is what just happened. You look at their last 5 losses.
That's incredible.
3 points, 2 points, 3 points, 3 points, 2 points. It's crazy. And you think that they would be able to get over the hump and break through, but it's just not happening. And San Francisco, a game that was there for them to win, a game that had a lot of turns in it. San Francisco, they go to their backup quarterback and C.J. Beathard. Brian Hoyer got the axe. He got benched, and Beathard comes in and doesn't look half bad. Look, for it is what it is. He comes in halfway through the game, and look, he did okay. 245 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, but had a chance late in that game to lead a drive down the field where they only needed a field goal to win. Got them close. Another questionable call by an official yet again this week. I said to you before we went on the air that there were a lot of weird calls this week. Here's another one. Pierre Garçon gets called for offensive pass interference, which I told you I didn't see it. I thought it was an awful call. It backs them up 10 yards, takes them out of field goal range. They seamlessly can't get back into field goal range, and Washington hangs on to win. It's a losing effort, but look, I'm impressed with San Francisco that they continue to battle and they continue to find ways to keep the game close. Washington, on the other hand, I'm not so impressed. This is a game that you're coming off a bye week. You need to kind of just pound San Francisco. You have the Eagles. You got to go to Philly next weekend on Monday night. You'd like to just have a nice, easy game and then just look forward to the Eagles game. But no, they didn't. And Washington, in the process, got banged up. First-round pick Jonathan Allen, he has a Liz Frank injury. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks. And then their kicker, Dustin Hopkins, he's going to miss the Eagles game this weekend. So 2 big losses there for the Redskins.
Yeah, that definitely hurts. And I saw today that they put Hopkins on IR.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
That definitely holds them back a little bit. But this is a team that continues to just play down to their competition, it seems like, every single week. And they play to their competition because they played the Chiefs close, but then the 0-5 49ers, now 0-6, they let them in it and nearly pull that away. The most impressive player for this Redskins team, not even close to me, is Chris Thompson. He's the first running back since Marshall Faulk to be on pace, if he can continue this, for 1,000 yards receiving as well as over 100 carries during the season. He's clearly their best back, not even close. He didn't do that well on the ground. He had 16 carries for 33 yards, but incredibly efficient through the air, 4 receptions for 105 yards, only 5 targets, but he continues to stay involved and make big plays for them. He had a 49-yard catch mixed in there with those stats. So every single week, it just seems how he plays like it wouldn't be repeatable because he has these explosive plays, pass plays from the backfield, but he's consistently been doing it all year long, and I've just been so impressed by him. Meanwhile, the guys that were supposed to be good, Terrell Pryor, Jordan Reed, Jamison Crowder, aren't doing anything. They've just been a huge, giant disappointment throughout the year.
Yeah, look, Chris Thompson, getting back to him, anytime you're mentioned in the same sentence as Marshall Faulk, you're doing something right. So kudos to him. You're right, Zach. He's definitely been probably the biggest bright spot for Washington so far in this young season. And the other guys you mentioned, I mean, the big one to me is Terrell Pryor. Like Crowder, okay, I could see maybe last year was kind of a flash in the pan. Jordan Reed, everyone knows he's a good player, but he's always hurt. He's always battling injuries. Terrell Pryor comes over from Cleveland after having some nice seasons there. And you finally have a quarterback you finally have an offense that's going to commit to throwing the football. And you have 1 touchdown this year. Like that's pathetic. Especially big as a mismatch as he is. That's just pathetic, like I said. So Washington squeaks out a win. It's going to be a tougher task this weekend as, like I said, they have to travel to Philly for Monday Night Football. Next game, Zach, we're going to look at, which is probably the oddest game of the weekend. Detroit going to New Orleans. If I would have told you that the Saints would have won 52-38, you probably would have thought that, all right, Drew Brees probably threw for 4 or 5 touchdowns. Likewise for Matthew Stafford, and neither defense could get a stop. Not quite. Not quite. The Saints defense somehow scored 3 touchdowns. The Saints defense, that's right. I said it. The Saints defense, the much maligned Saints defense, scored 3 touchdowns. So, look, this game was crazy because the Saints got out to a 45-10 lead. 45-10. That's 35 points. That is 5 touchdowns that they had to play with. Of course, they made it interesting, and the Lions scored 4 straight touchdowns, with 6 minutes and 47 seconds left. Breeze got intercepted by Ashawn Robinson at the 2-yard line, and he took it back to the house. And it was 45-38 with just under 7 minutes left. And this game was right there for Detroit to tie and to possibly steal and have the biggest comeback in NFL history. However, Matthew Stafford said, nah, we don't want to do that. we'll do you one better, Drew Brees, and we'll throw an interception to Cameron Jordan in the end zone. He didn't even have to run. He just caught it, and boom, it's a touchdown with 5 minutes left. And that obviously put them up 14, and the Saints don't look back. But crazy game, dude. I mean, really crazy. I mean, I didn't think that the Saints defense could result in 3 touchdowns. And this was one of the more odd games I've seen in some time. What do you take away from this game? Are you more kind of – I'm disappointed with the Lions. I'm going to be honest with you, because I thought in the beginning of the season, the very beginning of the season, I thought this Lions team could make some noise, and they start out 3-1. Now they lose 2 in a row. I guess that is what the Lions are, though. I mean, you start to put your trust in them, and they say, nah, Ryan, you can have that trust back. We're good. What do you take away from this game, Zach?
I was amazed in how close of a game it was. Like you said, it was a 1-score game within the last 7 minutes of the fourth quarter before the Saints pulled away with that final touchdown. It was that close, and Matthew Stafford turned it over 5 times. He threw 3 interceptions, like you mentioned, and also lost 2 fumbles. That's the number one reason they lost, and that's a tough position for the Lions, like you said, why they're so up and down, where this is mostly on one player here. That is a huge difference in the game there. 5 turnovers is an incredible amount that it's so hard to make up for that. And they almost did, which is incredible. Yeah. But they had 96 yards from both Golden Tate and Marvin Jones. Each of them got a touchdown. They stood out. Ted Ginn Jr. got himself a touchdown reception. And Mark Ingram just dominated this game. 25 rushes. They kept it on the ground with him for the Saints. 114 yards and scored 2 touchdowns there. And he was also active in the receiving game, catching it 5 times for 36 yards. He just was their most relied upon player, which is surprising with someone like Michael Thomas there, who didn't get much action. He only had 3 catches for 11 yards, but it was enough to pull out the game there for New Orleans, even though Detroit made it way closer than it should have been with such a bad game from Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, the Saints have those games, 1 or 2 of them every year, and I seem to always be on the short end of the stick. They always have those games where Sean Payton comes out and says, Drew Brees, I have one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, but we're going to run the ball 40 times. They always seem to do that, and they did it on Sunday, and I got shysted because Drew Brees had a shit day, cost me one of my fantasy matchups. Happened to me last year, too. And, oh, by the way, Sean Payton, it happened to me in the championship game of one of my leagues when you decided to just run the ball 40-plus times, and Drew Brees didn't do shit again and cost me my fantasy matchup. So Sean Payton, he's not getting he's not he comes trick-or-treating to my house. He ain't getting he ain't getting any candy. So it bugs me. It bugs me. You have Drew Brees. Granted, he won the game. I get it. The game plan worked. But as a fantasy owner, it does irk me a little bit.
It's always fascinating to see that aspect because what he does is clearly working in this scenario, feeding the ball to Mark Ingram. And I respect that. But they do consistently do weird things. Like I remember last year, they gave a handoff to tight end Kobe Fleener for a touchdown one game. It always seems like that. Last year, they were using Tim Hightower a lot, or in previous years, it just seemed like they were bringing in guys.
Matthew Berry always tweets
for a while.
Matthew Berry always tweets about that too, Zach. He had Mark Ingram last year and was just like at a loss because he would not get goal line touches like at all. Either they wouldn't run the ball on the goal line, or if they did, they just wouldn't use Mark Ingram.
I fully agree. I was so in on that with Matthew Berry. Like he always commented on that too. That fortunately for me, I had Kobe Fleener on that weird week that they handed him the ball, but he wasn't doing anything through the air. It is a tight end, and they just feed it to him at the goal line, and it clearly worked. But for fantasy purposes, there's no way you see that coming ever.
No, for sure, absolutely. So, yeah, like I said, one of the wilder games, probably the wildest game of the weekend, goes to the Saints. And look, Saints after starting off 0-2, they are 3-2, and on the upward trend. Let's see where things go with Drew Brees. Anything is possible, I guess. And Detroit, they're back to 3-3 and back to being the Lions. So, next game, Zach, we're going to look at your Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta
I don't know
Falcons,
why they get to be my Atlanta Falcons. I was pretty against them at the beginning.
Because they're your squad, man. That's the team that you said was going to absolutely shit the bed this year. And look, you're not too far off. I mean, if things continue this way, you'll be pretty accurate, because the Falcons lose back-to-back home games now to two AFC East opponents. They fall to the Miami Dolphins 20-17. To me, I think this is the worst loss of the weekend. I really do. I mean, you can look at some of the other games and say Denver losing to the Giants is bad, and a few others, but to me, this is the loss of the weekend. This is absolutely the loss of the weekend. This is the worst performance of the weekend. Not only do you lose to the Dolphins, but you were up 17-0 in this game at home against an offense who we talked about a lot on this show the last handful of weeks that couldn't do anything. And you let them score 20 straight points and win. Like, I'm not even sure, where to begin with a breakdown here. I mean, look, I guess maybe you point the finger at Matt Ryan and that offense, I guess. But you also have to look at the defense for not being able to get stops. I mean, the offense did spot you 17 points. You need to be able to, especially against this team, you need to be able to hold the fort. But still, not scoring any points in the second half, especially at home with this offense with Julio Jones and Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman, Taylor Gabriel. I mean, the list goes on and on. To not be able to score any points is problematic. And I guess, Zach, you probably saw this coming, though, because you're not a Falcons supporter. So where was your head at in this game after seeing this final?
This is the definition of a collapse. Like you mentioned, 17-0 lead, and they gave up 20 straight points to lose the game.
But it's the Falcons. What's what they do, right, Zach? They blow leads, just like in the Super Bowl last year.
That's what we've seen recently. I don't quite put them on it that it's that consistent, because Matt Ryan has been pretty good in the fourth quarters, especially last year before they got to the Super Bowl. But this team, it just – I was expecting Matt Ryan to take a step back, which he clearly has. Yardage-wise, he was all right, 248 yards. He threw one touchdown, one interception. It's a lot of just, okay, it's fine. But last year, he was a superstar. So a clear step back from that. And I really think for them to be a top team, they need him to be a superstar. And I don't know that he truly is. I think he had a superstar season. And this is more of what Matt Ryan is, that they need more playmakers that are really going to step up. And Julio Jones hasn't really had Julio Jones-type games this year. Last year, he was consistently over 100 yards, having whether it's multiple touchdown games, whether it's consistently scoring. He just hasn't been there. And this is another game, 72 yards and no touchdowns. That's fine for one of the receivers on the Panthers like Kelvin Benjamin or Devin Funchess. That's fine. But this is Julio Jones. They've got to feed him the ball, like we talked about with DeAndre Hopkins going in this season. He's their best offensive weapon. They gave him they threw it to him 7 times. He had 7 targets. He caught 6 of them. There's not a lot else he can do. Feed him the ball. Get him the ball. And they're going to have more success.
Yeah, excuse me. I totally agree. I mean, I don't know how you can disagree with that. You got to get Julio the ball, and you got to get him involved. And look, when he's out there, he's the best player. If not, he's definitely one of the best players on the field. So,
and
terrible.
This is healthy Julio. I was expecting he'd get injured too when I made that prediction of them missing the playoffs this year. That he's had his injuries, but he's been healthy. He just hasn't gotten the ball.
Sure, and that sticks out too. He's definitely had some injury problems the last handful of years, and he's been healthy. So you got to take advantage of it, and they haven't. And look, the Dolphins, for as much as we rip the Dolphins, they find themselves now at 3-2 and above 500, and we'll see what they do and see if Jay Cutler can maybe get into a little bit of a rhythm. I don't know, but definitely just an awful loss for the Atlanta Falcons. So next game, Zach, we'll look at definitely the biggest storyline coming out of Week 6. Green Bay traveled to Minnesota, and it was not a good day for the Green Bay Packers, not a good day for the fans, and not a good day for Aaron Rodgers. Look, he goes down after rolling out to his right and getting hit by Anthony Barr on what was a clean hit. It was a clean hit. At no point did I see that. I was watching it live, and then I saw the replay. At no point did I say that's a dirty hit. And just the way he fell, and you see it all the time with quarterbacks when they fall on that shoulder like that, and all that weight comes down on top of them. It's just too much for the body to handle, and their collarbone breaks, and that's what happened to Aaron Rodgers here. And he goes down, and not only do the Packers lose this game, Zach, but I think they also lose their season. Aaron Rodgers, look, everyone knows about Aaron Rodgers and how good he is. I watched a lot of Packers games this year. I really have, just between Week 1 when they played Seattle, I watched that game. At Atlanta on Sunday night, I watched that game. Cincinnati. All their games have been on national television, have been on TV around here, and I've watched every single one of them. So I watched a lot of Aaron Rodgers this year, and what he did the first 5-6 weeks of the season were remarkable. The offensive line was in shambles. He has no running game to speak of. He pretty much has to win the game for himself. The defense is okay. They're not great by any means. What Aaron Rodgers was doing this year was amazing. And now that he's out, you can't replace an Aaron Rodgers. You can't. They'll throw someone in there, whether it's Brett Hundley or whoever. They'll throw someone in there to try and, do the best they can to finish this year, but you can't replace them. Their season is over. They're done. I'm going on record now saying that, look, they're not – even though they're 4-2 right now, I don't see them making the playoffs. I don't see them doing anything, quite frankly, to finish out the year. And as far as the Vikings goes, this really opens things up for the division, though, doesn't it? They're now 4-2. They hold a tiebreaker currently over the Green Bay Packers, and the Vikings were a team that I thought would win the division at the beginning of the year. Looks like I might be right, but it's probably going to be by default because Aaron Rodgers going down for the Packers really, really hurts. What's your take?
It's unfortunate for the Packers because, as you mentioned, they're sitting at 4-2. If the playoffs started today, they would definitely be in. They just are not the same team without Aaron Rodgers. Some other teams, you see the Vikings, are perfectly fine surviving without Sam Bradford, their starting quarterback, because they rely on their defense. This Packers team does not have a dominant defense at all. You mentioned the offensive line struggles. The running back position has had its struggles. They really, really rely on Aaron Rodgers in the passing game, and that's what they lose. We see Brett Hundley came in. He threw 3 interceptions the first game. I just don't see it going well from this point forward, which could be interesting for the Packers. I think of a couple years ago, just before Zeke Elliott and Dak Prescott with the Dallas Cowboys, when they lost starting quarterback Tony Romo early in the season. They had a mess of terrible backup quarterbacks play. They got one of the top picks. That's where they got Ezekiel Elliott and really changed that franchise around. So this could be an opportunity for the Packers, even though it's probably going to be a lost season, that it's been a long time since they've had a really high draft pick. And that could be kind of a blessing in disguise that they get, whether it's a reliable running back, whether it's a star for their defense to add. It could be interesting to see what ends up happening with that, because Aaron Rodgers still has plenty more years he's going to be playing in the NFL. So for them to be able to build some solid play pieces around him, that can be good for them down the road. Even though this season it's unfortunate, but I see it mostly being a lost season for him.
Yeah, Zach, that's an interesting point. That's something I didn't really think about, is the fact that they should get a higher draft pick and definitely add a difference maker either to offense or defense for the Packers. Look, if I was the Packers, what I would do with that draft pick is I would take the best offensive lineman available because, look, Aaron Rodgers is your team, but Aaron Rodgers isn't your team if Aaron Rodgers isn't on the field. He needs protected. He wasn't protected at all this year. Took a lot of hits. Was definitely the top 2 or 3 in sacks on the season so far. And look, it cost them the season. So yeah, that's what I would do. And it's a shame because Aaron Rodgers is definitely one of the more entertaining and just great players to watch in this league. So he goes out and Green Bay tries to patch things together. Good luck because I don't see it working out too well. Next game, Zach, we'll move on. The matchup of I don't even know how I wanted to describe this. Just the probably the game that a lot of people didn't expect to get a lot of publicity and live up to the hype, but it kind of did. Now, granted, it didn't live up to the hype that much. It was a pretty boring game, actually, but the fact that the Rams and the Jaguars are playing a pretty meaningful game in Week 6 of the season definitely says something. The Rams, look, they get the win 27-17. Pretty interesting one here. They take the opening kickoff to the house to start things off this game. Pharaoh Cooper goes 103 yards, and then boom, right away, the first play from scrimmage then for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Leonard Fournette rips off a 75-yard touchdown run and ties things at 7. After that, though, the Jags couldn't get anything going offensively. They really couldn't do anything, and I think it kind of goes to show you that look, unless Fournette's giving you something on the ground, and unless the defense and special teams are contributing with for scores, the Jags are just kind of a mirage and aren't going to do anything offensively and aren't going to score enough points to win football games. Credit the Rams for getting a good, in my opinion, a good road win. Wasn't pretty by any means. You got a special teams touchdown in there. They got a blocked punt. Did the Rams, and that really kind of opened things up, gave them a 10-point lead, and they didn't look back. But look, the Rams are 4-2. The Rams have a win over the Cowboys. And look, I think the Rams are kind of showing that, look, I think they're going to be a team to stay and a team that could probably compete, if not for the division, definitely a wild card spot.
I don't. They'll definitely be towards the top of the division, but I don't really see them making the playoffs this year. I'm impressed with the 4-2 record. Did not see that coming. Todd Gurley has really stepped up for them, and they've been able to really rely on him this year. He had 116 yards in this game, and they really got the Jaguars out of what they do well. The Jaguars have been winning when they keep the ball on the ground, they keep it out of Blake Bortles' hands. This is a game the Rams forced him to pass 35 times. He was better than expected. He completed 65% of his passes, only 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So pretty standard stats, nothing too exciting. But the Jaguars need to rely on their running game and really have that carry them. And other than that 75-yard touchdown run, they held Leonard Fournette in check pretty well.
Yep.
130 total yards, that comes out to 55 yards on 20 carries other than that one carry. So that's big for the Rams and their defense to be able to step up and hold him down like that. And I was amazed at the second half, each team only scored 3 points after 24-14 halftime score there. quite the drop-off in scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watched a decent bit of this game just because I have Fournette in one of my fantasy leagues, and the offense for Jacksonville was just absolutely pathetic. Like, no creativity. Like, it felt like you were watching a game from like the 1950s or 60s. Just like line up, turn around, hand the football off, get a yard or two, and just do the same thing over and over again. Like, it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. And Jacksonville played probably their worst game of the season. Like I said, big win for the Rams. They go to 4-2, and continue this start to the season that not a lot of people saw coming. Next game Zach will look at was a high scoring affair, a game that was similar to the Saints and Lions game, where one team got up big early and then the other team scratched and clawed and made it interesting late. Arizona hung on to beat Tampa Bay 38-33. However, like I said, Arizona got up 31-0 in this game. 31-0, and let Tampa Bay come all the way back to 38-33. And Tampa had a chance to get an onside kick late in that game. Didn't get it, and Arizona runs the clock out. But I guess you have to start, obviously, with Adrian Peterson. He gets traded, like we said last week, to the Arizona Cardinals. And look, they said they were going to use him. Bruce Arians said he was going to use him, and he didn't lie. He got 26 carries, and he made good use of all 26 of those carries, 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he said he had a lot left in the tank, and he definitely proved it. So definitely an impressive outing by Adrian Peterson. Another impressive performance in this game came from Larry Fitzgerald. He was targeted 11 times. He caught 10 of them for 138 yards and a touchdown. I've said many times on the show, and even just talking with other people, is I love Larry Fitzgerald, and I really wish he wouldn't retire. He's so reliable. He's such a good player too. Like, he's not a headache. He's not that typical wide receiver that's a pain in the ass. He does things the right way. So kudos to Larry Fitzgerald. And then on Tampa Bay side, Jameis Winston went out early in this game with a shoulder injury. Didn't come back to the game, but it sounds like it was just precautionary. Sounds like he's going to play this weekend. So obviously that's big news for Tampa Bay. Ryan Fitzpatrick filled in, and he just kind of did okay. Didn't do anything great, but
We let him on that. What do you take comeback?
Yeah, no. I mean, he definitely did. He definitely was able to bring them back somewhat through a few touchdown passes. They were down 31-6, and then he connected with Deshaun Jackson, threw one to Cameron Brate, threw one to what's his name, Mike Evans late as well. They're a beneficiary of a fumble recovery for a touchdown as well in there. So, he did all right. I think a lot of that was to the fact that Arizona was up by so many points. They were just playing that patented prevent defense and just kind of letting them take what was there. And you want to go on a couple scoring drives, fine, but use the clock. So, but it's pretty obvious they're going to need Jameis Winston going forward to go where they want to go.
Yeah, I fully agree. That definitely hurt him this game. And this is another quarterback injury. I know I've talked to a couple people that were starting Aaron Rodgers or starting Jameis Winston this week, and sometimes that happens. Quarterback is the highest scoring player in most fantasy leagues, and it really hurts when you lose your quarterback there. You've got to have someone have a crazy game to be able to really make up for that. So I know people were hurt by that Jameis Winston injury there. Doug Martin did fine, 53 yards and a touchdown there for Tampa Bay, but mostly came through the air for what they produced. Mike Evans did well, 95 yards and a touchdown. Cameron Brate, 76 and a touchdown. Deshaun Jackson also had a touchdown, although only 38 yards. So both of these passing offenses have been solid. The Cardinals spread it around a lot more. You mentioned Larry Fitzgerald has been fantastic. He got 10 of the receptions. And then from there, there's a lot of different guys getting consistent action. although nothing too big. John Brown was the second leading receiver with 63 yards. But it's interesting to see the Cardinals have a running game now. That's something they really struggled with coming into this game. And after making that Adrian Peterson trade, I don't know if this will continue or be kind of an anomaly game. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But very impressive first game there for Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, and the Cardinals look 3-3 in a division that's is well within reach. I mean, the Rams are in first place at 4-2, and the Seahawks are in front of them at 3-2. Obviously, having had their bye week, so things are right there for the Cardinals in their division. So I think they saw that and they felt they had to go out and make a deal and bring the Adrian Peterson in here, and let's see how AP does going forward, if he can continue to string these kind of games together, or if this just was a kind of flash in the pan. Will be interesting to see. Next one, Zach, we're going to go out to the West Coast here. The LA Chargers go into Oakland and beat the Raiders. What is wrong with the Oakland Raiders? I think that's the question everybody's trying to answer. They now fall to 2-4 on the season. A team that a lot of people thought for sure this is a playoff team. This is a team that could possibly make a deep run to the playoffs, and it hasn't gone that way. I mean, they are really struggling, Zach. They are really struggling to find any sort of identity. They have lost 4 games in a row after starting the year 2-0. They lost to the Redskins, to the Broncos, the Ravens, and now to the Chargers. The last 2 weeks are really some head-scratching games here. Baltimore last week obviously was without Derek Carr, but you got Derek Carr back, and you lose at home to the Chargers, and you let the Chargers come back in this one. Again, another game where a team has the lead late and lets it slip away. I'm not really sure what to say about this game. I'm not sure what to say about the Raiders. To me, and look, I did a fantasy football preview video with one of my friends, Jeff, and one of the guys now. Granted, I know he's banged up now, but even the beginning of the year, he wasn't doing all that great. I said Derek Carr would take a step back, and Derek Carr wouldn't have the best year fantasy-wise. And so far I'm right. I think the Raiders really need to lean on Marshawn Lynch. Okay, why'd you bring him in here? That's my question. Like, why did they bring Marshawn Lynch in here? He had 63 yards on only 13 carries, and then and that's it. Like, I mean, where's the 20-plus carries for this guy? I mean, he came out of retirement. He clearly wants to play for you. Give him the ball. I think you need to lean a little bit more on Marshawn Lynch, less on Derek Carr, and try that approach, because what you're doing now clearly isn't working. And look, credit the Chargers, because they've now won 2 games in a row, have found some ways to win. And Melvin Gordon is looking like one of the best running backs in football the last couple of weeks. He's really putting together some really good performances, especially catching the ball out of the backfield. He's becoming that safety blanket for Phillip Rivers. So I want to start out with Oakland here, Zach. What do you make of this mess out in Oakland?
Well, with Marshawn Lynch, I think some of it is he took a full year off. I don't know that they feel fully comfortable giving him 20-plus carries a game. I know last year they used
Zach, they're 2-4. They don't have many other options.
I agree, but that's a problem. If he gets injured, the other 2 running backs that got action in this game combined for 5 carries for -9 yards. If there's an injury to Marshawn Lynch, they're done. They have nothing left. Like, they've got to do something for him, and they've relied a lot last year on a 3-headed attack with Latavius Murray, Jalen Richard, and DeAndre Washington. And I think they were expecting that again, except replacing Latavius Murray with Marshawn Lynch. And it just hasn't worked out. Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington, those are the 2 guys I mentioned. Richard had -1 yard on 2 carries. Washington had -8 yards on 3 carries. And they need something else there to be able to spell Marshawn Lynch. He might not be the player he once was they can handle that on throughout a 16-game season plus the playoffs on getting 20, 25, maybe even 30 carries in a game. I agree they could use him more, but I think that's probably the main reason they're holding off on it a little bit. But you see, the passing game has really dropped off too. Michael Crabtree's still been consistent as the go-to guy, but Amari Cooper, I know I mentioned it last week, he's benched until further notice in my fantasy league. He's just non-existent. He had 5 catches for 28 yards this week, which was an improvement. It was an improvement over last week when I think he had 8 yards receiving. He's gone. I don't know what the deal is there. Jared Cook has always shown his athletic ability and then not done much. I'm not sure why they expected that to change, but he had 14 yards receiving. They've got to get something else going here beyond just Marshawn Lynch. And I agree that's all they have, but they can't just feed him 100% of the time.
But I think I just think by establishing the running game early and often is going to open up the passing game, a struggling passing game. I think that's just the best way to attack it because, look, Zach, you're 2-4 now. You can't play any more games. You can't say, well, we're going to hold off on Marshawn to the end of the year and then just use him as a battering ram at the end of the year to close out games and whatnot. That ship has sailed. You're 2-4. You're last place in your division. Oh, by the way, a division that has possibly the best team in football in the Chiefs at 5-1, and the Broncos sitting there at 3-2, and then the Chargers who are 2-4, who you just lost to, who you're staring up at now. So they're running out of options, and they need to figure something out and figure something out quick because things are fixing to get pretty bad out there in Oakland. You look at the schedule for this week, Zach. Oakland has to go. They stay at home and they welcome Kansas City to town on a short week. So, in my opinion, this is the Oakland season right here. They're at home. You're taking on the team that's in first place in your division. You either buck up or you shut up. You lose this game, you're done. If they lose this game, they're finished. Sorry, they're not going to go 2-5 and then all of a sudden have this miraculous turnaround and come back and make the playoffs or win the division. It ain't going to happen. You win this game, different story. You have a chance to kind of, make some noise. But this obviously is a huge, huge game for Oakland.
I agree. And one of the things that does hold this team back, we talked about it with our season preview, this is one of the closest matched divisions in the league. So they have all these tough divisional opponents that, like you said with the Chiefs, that's going to really hold them back. And the division winner might only have 10 or 9 wins. I really doubt a wild card team is coming from this division. So it would, for them to make the playoffs, it's got to start with a win against Kansas City. And I don't see that happening. I think they're going to be closer to 500, maybe just below it throughout the rest of the season, unless something major changes with whether it's Amari Cooper, whether someone else stepping up. But I don't see a reason why I would think that is something that's possible right now.
For sure. Last game, Zach, we'll stay in the AFC West. Was the matchup of the weekend that everyone was looking forward to. Pittsburgh went to Kansas City and got themselves a much-needed win. Handed Kansas City their first loss on the season. Pittsburgh wins 19-13 in a pretty exciting and entertaining game. I thought this was kind of Le'Veon Bell's coming out party, and he really got things going for the Steelers and for himself really this year. He had 32 carries for 179 yards in this game, did have the 1 touchdown. So it was pretty evident that they wanted to feed him the ball. And look, for whatever reason, they have Kansas City's number and have Kansas City's number in Arrowhead Stadium. They did played them 2 times last year, and then obviously get a big win on Sunday. So and I think this is what Pittsburgh needs to continue to do, because I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, Ben Roethlisberger, he's eventually going to come out of this." I'm not so sure he's gonna. I mean, we see this with players, like they hit a wall. Look, let's not forget, like Ben Roethlisberger has been playing for a long time. Like, let's look at some of these guys that were drafted around the same time. Okay, Ben, who's struggling. Eli, who's struggling. Rivers, who, I mean, he's like hit or miss. He struggles, and he throws a good week or two up. But, I mean, it's no coincidence that these guys are starting to struggle. I mean, they're getting older. Their bodies are breaking down, especially Ben, a guy that's had a lot of injuries in his career. I'm not so sure Ben's going to, quote unquote, just snap out of this slump and all of a sudden get back to being the old Ben Roethlisberger. I think this is the approach Pittsburgh needs to take, is run the ball with Le'Veon Bell, let him do what he does, and then let Antonio Brown make a couple big plays throughout the game as well, like he did on just a ridiculous catch. A ball you think's going to be intercepted, hits off the defender's helmet. Brown sticks his left hand up, snatches it out of the air, then takes it to the house. So ultimately is the game-winning play there. So Pittsburgh gets a big win. Not that big of a loss for Kansas City. They dropped to 5-1. You weren't going to win every game, obviously. Their offense was the big story. Pretty lackadaisical and couldn't get anything going. What did you take away from this game? Were you kind of more impressed with the Steelers here, or did you kind of surprised that Kansas City laid an egg the way they did?
So two things really stood out for me. First off, from the Steelers' defense, this is the first time Kareem Hunt was really held down on the ground. He had 9 rushes, only came away with 21 yards. For those that have him on your fantasy team, I have him on 2 different teams. He made up for it in the receiving game. He had 5 receptions for 89 yards. So he still had a solid week this week when it comes to fantasy points. But he just didn't get much going at any point there rushing the ball, which really hurt them. And the second thing, this has come up with a couple different teams now, but the Steelers do it so well. They feed their stars. Le'Veon Bell, 32 carries. Antonio Brown, 10 targets. It makes sense. And they had success with it. What a surprise. That's what teams have to do, and they're going to have success. Feed your stars.
I feel like, Zach, I see it a lot in not even just football, but just sports in general. Like, coaches try to get like too cute and too fancy, try to like outsmart the other coach by like I always use the example. Like, I actually just was talking about it this past weekend. I forget the context, but Andy Reid was notorious and it's funny, Andy Reid was the coach in this game again too. I didn't plan that. It's just how it worked out. But Andy Reid, when he was with the Eagles, was notorious for, coming into game week, you knew that the team that the Eagles were playing was, ranked 30th in the league against the run. Andy Reid would drop Donovan McNabb back in that game to pass 50 times, and the Eagles would lose. And you're sitting there watching this game, and you're saying to yourself, like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, this team cannot stop the run, and you've only attempted 11 rushing attempts in this game. Like, it's stuff like that makes you like wonder how these guys have coaching jobs. And it's nice to see Mike Tomlin is like, nah, Roethlisberger's struggling. Bell's back. This is his 6th game. Let's give him a big workload. He stepped up to the play, he delivered, and Brown delivered as well because he always delivers. So you're right. Get the stars the ball and let them do what they do. So, look, big win for the Steelers after kind of all the I don't want to say turmoil that's been going on there, but has been a lot of shit going on there in Pittsburgh. So that's a big win for them. So that's it for the NFL. That's it for, or I should say, that's it for our Week 6. Looking back at Week 6 and breaking down the matchups there for Week 6.
And
transitioning.
The last 3 games we didn't cover, just to go through briefly. The Giants picked up their first win over Denver. Cleveland lost to Houston. Deshaun Watson had another good game, but Cleveland's bad. The Giants are bad. We didn't really want to talk about them too much. And then the Colts are bad. The Colts lost to the Titans. So we felt like there wasn't a whole lot to go over with any of those teams. So we're skipping ahead over anything there, unless you got anything else to add with those games.
No, I don't. Not at all. Not at all. And you're exactly right. That's why we skipped over them. We do that. We're going to do that from here on out. the games like that are just really bad or big-time blowouts or just involving really poor teams, we're just not going to bother talking about just because it's kind of a waste of time, and we try to shorten up the show a little bit. So just real quickly, looking to next week, Zach, I'll give you one game that I'm looking forward to, and I'll let you give one or two that you're looking forward to. For me, I'm going to kind of take the easy way out and look at the Sunday night game, Atlanta at New England. Not because just of the matchup, just because of where these two teams stand. Atlanta struggling, New England kind of has been struggling this year. Not the same, maybe not what these teams and what these teams fans expected coming into the year. So that's the game I'm looking forward to. Also, the Packers and Aaron Rodgers did us a real big disservice because Breeze and Rodgers matchup this week would have been really exciting. So that's unfortunate. So what's one or two games, Zach, you're looking forward to next week?
The biggest one that stands out to me, I know it's not great teams or anything, but I'm interested to see how the matchup goes between these two division rivals. The Broncos are really on a downslide after losing to the Giants, while the Chargers, after starting out winless, have won 2 games in a row, and they're matching up against each other within the division here. That's something that's interesting to me. They could be battling towards the top of that division depending on how the season goes. If the Chargers can really turn things around, this is going to be a big step for it. If the Broncos are going to be as good as they looked against the Cowboys, this is a big step to turn around. So one of those teams is gonna start moving forward to turning things around. The other is going to be in a position where there's a lot of question marks there. That's the real big one that stood out to me. There's a lot of other games that I think might be close. They might be interesting to watch. But like you mentioned, Falcons and Patriots is the other one. And then Eagles Redskins on Monday night that stood out beyond that one.
Yeah, for as bad as the primetime games were last week, this week's a complete 180. It looks like the primetime game should live up to the hype. We'll see how obviously that plays out.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback as we continue to build this platform with our podcast. It's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.